Hello, everyone, and
Hello.
welcome to the second edition of the Tao of Glass podcast with your hosts, Trent Neidiger
Hello.
and Kevin Peterson. So, Trent, the first episode, first of all, on a personal level, like I feel really good about it because we started down this path or this journey with our audience around, challenging your belief system, starting to question reality a little bit, and we did introduce the concept of the Tao of Glass.
Yes.
So yes, so for this second episode, I thought we'd get started with framing it a little bit. There's one thing that I want to be careful of, and it's that I don't want anyone to think that we are preaching any particular thing.
Yeah, no.
So the concept here is that we can't presume to know what's right for, like, I wouldn't presume to know what's right for you, and I know you. Like, you're my friend.
Right.
And you've got a great soul and a great vibe, and I wouldn't presume to know what you need or want out of life, or what you're hoping for from the universe, or what you personally are trying to manifest.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure that our audience is aware that we are also not trying to prescribe a particular thing for anybody. So what we're really here to explore is reality and energy, and how energy flows, and how people can better manifest the things that are important to them. So it's like, I can't tell you, using the Tao of Glass metaphor, I can't tell you what should be in your glass. And I would never say it that way. I would never say, like, hey, Trent, you really should X, or you really need Y. I'm not going to do it, because how do I know? You're you, I'm me. We all have our own experience and our own reality. And quite frankly, many of us, as we've started to explore, are living on different planes, or all practically in different universes already. So how could we possibly prescribe? But that said, I just want to touch on one concept to kick us off today, which is just, the contents of your glass. Your glass is always full. The contents are only relatively useful, and the contents are up to you. And it's awesome, and it comes with a huge responsibility, because you will want to fill your glass with the things that are important to you. So step one is figuring out what's important to you. Step two is, well, then fill your glass with that thing. So I'm gonna throw out one example, and then Trent, I'll turn it over to you to riff on this a little bit. But just as one example is, your brain, right? Your brain is made of fatty tissue, and amazingly, for some unknown reason, it fires off electricity. There's electrons firing all the time, and synapses that are connected. Don't know why, don't know how. I mean, physics.
Mind you.
It seems, if you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous and impossible.
Yeah, but it happens.
But it happens all the time, yes. And so if your brain is important to you, then do things that are good for your brain, right? Like, don't influence your brain with chemicals that are bad for it, or that will gum up the connections and keep the neurons from firing well. Don't fill it with content that is bad for you, like that doesn't feel right, or doesn't resonate with you, or doesn't harmonize with your existence and your reality. And I'll just give you another example, just going down that path, is like how we consume news is an example, right? Like, people, or social media, people look at news and social media and they'll get really angry, then frustrated, and they'll be like, why is it like that? And if I could only fix those people, then X, Y, and Z would happen instead, right? And that's not necessarily good for your brain, right?
Right.
There are things we can challenge we can work to consume nutrients that are good for a healthy brain and keep us sharp, and we can consume content that our brain enjoys. Like, and that could be anything. For me, music is certainly one of them.
Right. Yeah, it's like for my wife, for example, she loves like documentaries, she loves like history, and she loves astrology. You know what I mean? Whereas I love science fiction, I love fantasy, and I love the storylines. And those are ways that I work out issues by watching something like that and seeing what the characters go through in those storylines. I'm kind of relating in minute, sometimes not minute ways to my own life, in the sense of like, I have felt that way, and like I would like to do differently. You know what I mean? And it's just interesting to kind of really understand how the media, kind of like they say, the media nutrients that you're feeding your mind with are very important. Actually, a guy that talks about this actually quite frequently, if some people, you probably very much know him, is Gary Vaynerchuk. He talks about this all the time. The content you consume is going to drive a lot of your like motivations and ambitions. Like, you are the content that you consume. You know, someone who only does math becomes a mathematician. Someone who only does biology becomes a biologist, right? So what is the content? What's the quality of the content? And what is your relationship to that content? How are you treating it internally? I think is a really important question for people to ask.
Yeah, and it's the mind-body connection, and then the mind-soul connection are just phenomenal as well. Like,
Yeah.
how you think about stuff and what you choose to consume affects not only your mind but your body and your health and your physical, both your physical and your, electric being.
Mm-hmm. Yes. To that point, I heard of, talking about electric being, just a real quick tangent here, that because of the nature of our bodies, and we're mostly made of water, also, as we talked about last time, a lot of bacteria, which are also need water.
Mostly
right?
water, yes.
Yeah. I mean, you go find a rock in the river and it's going to be covered in what? Bacteria, right? You
Right.
go find water,
Right.
it's going to be full of stuff.
Yes.
But one of the things that I thought was interesting is the way that they describe our bodies as crystalline structures. And there was this really interesting video of this guy doing yoga, and there were these geometric lines that went from different points on his body to show what the crystalline structure of his body looked like as he went through the movements. And it was really, really fascinating in like the way that we think about that. You know what I mean? But that was a side tangent. I'd like to go back to one of the things we talked about, as far as you needing, the audience, and all of us really needing to decide what is important for us and what do we want to manifest. And once we understand what that is, we can go start filling our glass with that, right? What is relative and relevant for us in that moment? And one of the things I think people need to be careful with, going forward, as far as like the media that you're consuming, is there's a lot of people that understand this. And a good friend of mine out of Alaska, who, I mean, he's an ex-veteran, he's got his JD, he's got his MBA, he's a phenomenal human being. His focus and passion is helping veterans transition back into normal life. And he's got this whole program that he's starting to put out there called the Zen Veteran. And really what he's talking about, the things that he's decided to do, is take all of these kind of like business concepts, like cliches that we hear all the time, and he's making AI art out of it to make like a visual for these things, like quiet quitting, you know what I mean? Or heightened burnout, these kind of buzzwords that we hear in the business world a lot, you know what I mean? As far as founders and
Yes.
entrepreneurs, it's like, we need to be careful of these things. And I think that when we kind of get into these vulnerable states and we start searching, a lot of people look for this silver bullet fix, right? I want to start this program, take this class, get this coach, and it's going to fix all of my problems. And it's kind of like you said, no, it's not. Because, like, for example, that person isn't going to know all the particular details of your situation. They just can't. The enormity of what goes into your choices every day are not just on a business level, but you're incorporating personal, mental, spiritual feelings and stuff into these things, right? And so one of the things, again, I think where this kind of first warning in this episode here is, be cautious of drive-by mentorship. You go to a lot of, events, or you meet a lot of people and you meet a successful person. Try not to just hope that whatever they tell you is going to be this silver bullet fix or solution to what you're doing, but realize that that is kind of like drive-by mentorship in the sense that you're driving by them in life at this event. You have a very short, brief interaction. They tell you something and you take that as like gospel, like that is absolute truth. I need to go implement this right now in my business, change everything, restructure, whatever it is. But I think to like just be wary of that. Trust yourself and your intuition and get to know yourself. I think that's what we're really trying to kind of also reiterate is we want you to get to know yourself better so that you can realize that there are more possibilities than you could possibly imagine out there for you. Because there are. I mean, it's the incredible stories that you hear on a day-to-day basis when you start going down this path and you start meeting these people. I mean, Kevin just told me about an entire weekend of people that he met, and I was just like, that sounds amazing. Great connections, great relationships. So just keep that in mind, if you're listening to the content and as you're going through your day-to-day, be aware of those things. Really be aware of the content you're taking and the nature of the relationship from which the content is coming from.
Yeah, well said. Really well said. There's biases in content. Your own and the person delivering the content have their own biases and their own filters. You have your own filters. I guess the one thing I would add to that is, meditating on what you learn as you learn it is, it's something I found helpful. Like when I go to a conference as an example, and I learn, a dozen things that really stuck with me from, all of hours of presentation, right?
Yeah.
I will take the time to really reflect and challenge it. Say like, was that right? Like and really what it comes down to is, for me anyway, is getting past the intellectual part of saying true or false, right? Logically, is that true or false? The thing that stuck with me that one person said, is it true or false? Then the layer beyond that's important to me is, how do I feel about it? Does it feel right? Does it feel right in my own life and in my story and does it feed into the journey I'm on? And sometimes I find that by going through that process of reflecting on my learnings on a regular basis,
right,
I'll find that I will learn some amazing things where I'm like, wow, that was really cool. That person is so smart and I love what they're doing. And it has nothing to do with my journey, right? It's not useful for me. It gets back to the usefulness of the contents of the glass, right? Like that is amazing and not useful.
Yeah, that's a really pretty glass right there, but that is not relevant or useful for me at this moment.
Exactly.
And I think that's something else to talk about as far as the Tao of glass is concerned is, what does your glass look like?
Yes.
What is the visual of this glass that you're filling up with whatever relevant stuff, whether that's water, whether it's relationships, whether it's nutrients for your brain, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Whatever that is, I think that you should put a visual picture to that glass.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Is it ornate? Is it plain? Is it golden? Is it gilded? Like,
yes.
I think that's an interesting thing to kind of consider as well. So to the point of like meditating as well, like upon these things, I think there's a concept from yoga. I'm a yogi, so again, you're going to get a lot of yoga stuff in this, kind of peppered in there. But most people think that yoga is just this series of poses and stuff that you go through. It's kind of like an exercise. It makes you flexible, and that's pretty much it. When it's really not. And it's much more about melding your physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, and spiritual selves to operate more harmoniously together. You know what I mean? Really unifying those so that you're not operating from one and then the other, and you're kind of switching these different, bodies, so to speak, that we have. That's really the purpose of it. And those poses that people put themselves through, the sun salutations and stuff like that, is a tool, one of 8 tools that yoga uses to help you achieve that end of consciousness. Now, in the actual physical pose part, at the end of every single yoga class that you go to, you are going to have Shavasana. Shavasana is what's called corpse pose, as you translate that from Hindi. Corpse pose meaning that's where you lay on the ground and get to take a nap. as most people kind of jokingly talk about it, right? But the real purpose for Shavasana is to allow your body a moment of meditation and rest to assimilate all of the new movements, inspirations, thoughts, and emotions that you just put yourself through. To give yourself space for it to download that learning, so to speak, and that practice, so that the next time that you go, and it's really that practice that creates that flexibility, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally. So that practice of really taking some time to rest and meditate on things, like after a conference is a great time. I mean, you go to a conference, you have how many conversations? Take some time at the end of the night. In fact, this is something that we just recently went through. We went to Vegas, me and my partner and, our sales guy that we were down there with. At the end of the night, we'd gone to dinner with the client. We came back and we spent about 30 minutes just kind of talking about the different interactions, how we felt about them, what it meant. Is that, you know what I mean? We call this the vetting process in business. But I think that on a personal level, you need to start vetting these situations and scenarios, as Kevin said, like, wow, that was really, really cool. But is it relevant and is it useful?
Yes. And I think, so this is something that I never really explored. And this is, and for those of you watching this, you're going to get a glimpse of how Trent and I usually interact, which is, so I have some epiphany that pops in my brain and I'm like, I need to talk to Trent about that.
Yeah, likewise.
So the thing that just popped in my head here, the epiphany based on what you were just saying is that you're right that in business, we talk about a vetting process, and that could be for clients or vendors or employees or whatever, right? Business partners. We all, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, go through spiritual vetting all the time.
Yeah.
And I've never really explored that. I've never really explored, like, what does that mean to, sort of envision my electric self and my spiritual self interacting with the thing or a situation or a person and vetting it and really almost consuming it and digesting it and recognizing or exploring, okay, where is this taking me? And is it taking me a direction I want to go?
Yeah.
And what if I follow this path with this other electric being, where will we be in 20 years? Or 2 weeks or 20 minutes, right? The time isn't necessarily the goalpost, but
there's times that, like, I'll meet people at a conference and just energetically I'm like, I don't need to talk to you ever again.
No.
I don't need to
exactly
ever again. But then there's other people like Kevin or other people that I meet that I'm like, I want, not just like I need, but like I really, really want to talk to this person. I want to be involved somehow. I just, and that's, and what's really interesting, we talk about this vetting process. I really kind of started down this vetting process back in 2016 when I went to India to get certified for yoga, and I taught yoga over there for several months. It's a fantastic experience. A lot of things happened. Actually, my guru, my teacher, she died in the middle of the thing, and it was very traumatic, kind of a whole situation. Yeah, and then she was young. I mean, she was 36 at the time. Whoa. She was not old. It was a very unique situation, very sudden, very traumatic. But what it did is it really started to kind of like send me down, because of the things that she had taught me, and because of that event, I started to really spiritually vet myself. As far as like, where did I want my life to go? What do I really want to do? How do I want to feel like when I go to work, when I interact with people, how do I want to feel? And I really kind of started down that process and reflecting on certain things. And it wasn't necessarily a short process, but in the beginning of 2019, I realized that at the current time, I was in the dental industry and I hated it. I don't like dentistry as an industry. I love the emergency work and the repair that they can do. But working in that industry, people are always in pain. They're always upset because their insurance doesn't cover what they think it's going to cover. And then they're always upset that it's costs more, takes longer, all those things, right? And so there's this, and then on top of that, most dentists, not all dentists, but most of them are not great business people. So
Sure.
run their businesses, treat their employees very well. So I decided that I was done. And I just decided to really go off. And it was because of this spiritual vetting that I had done and really thinking about my life and the way that I wanted to go that I find myself where I'm at now. You know, like really trying to make conscious decisions. And even then, I've made mistakes. I have, you know, and this is one of the things I'd like to really kind of talk to people in the sense of really develop that relationship with yourself, with the various versions of yourself, your intellectual self, your emotional self, your spiritual self, your physical self. The more that you do that, the easier this vetting process will be as you go through life. As he said, do I want to walk down this pathway with this other electrical being for the next 20 years, 20 minutes, 20 days, whatever that might be? Do you know what I mean? And that I think will bring more fruitful relationships. The times that I have neglected to do this with people because I was just excited about whatever the opportunity or the money or whatever it was that was in front of me, I usually ended up damaging some relationships because I opened up connections and relationships that just weren't energetically harmonious.
Sure.
And it hurt me not only just emotionally and physically, but it also hurt my business. You know what I mean? There were things that happened along the way where it was like, wow, that was big foobar. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So.
No, I know. Me too. I've done that. We've all done it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a learning process. So let's go deeper there for a minute. And I'm gonna tap your philosophy background a little bit here.
Yeah.
So, the challenge is this, and this is something that we all face physically and emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah.
It's really easy to say to someone, like if someone says, oh man, like I want to be in better health. I want my health to be better. Like it's starting to impact my life and my attitude and my emotions. And I want to be in better health. It's really easy to say, so do it. Right. And I do say that to people, and it is meant to be uncomfortable. But the reason is we're running on the assumption that we do have free will, and with free will comes accountability. And so the hard part of this exploration is determining what you even want and what you want in your glass, right? And if you proclaim one day that, oh man, like I can't take this anymore, I want to be in better health, the right answer is then be in better health. I know I'm oversimplifying. There are going to be people that send me hate emails for this because things happen, right? But and all of us are going to have health challenges. Absolutely, every single person on the planet is going to have health challenges, and the outcome for all of us is known. The only thing that's unknown is the time.
Prepare well.
Yes, and well, that's another episode entirely. We will spend an entire episode just on that, on preparing for death. But in the meantime, you do have choices. I have choices. Like I can eat more vegetables. I can not eat a donut today, right? There are things that I can do. I can choose healthier ingredients to put in my body. I can choose not to eat stuff that's, well, This is where I'm at on my journey. I had a birthday last week while I was in Trinidad. I turned 55.
Well done.
Thank you. 55 laps around the sun, still here. And so, for me, I'm at a point where when I walk into a grocery store, I look around and my first thought is, there's almost nothing in this place I can eat. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I look around a grocery store and I think, okay, that aisle is all high sugar. That aisle is entirely packaged artificial goods. There's only a few things I can eat. It's mostly in the produce section. It's not even a mystery.
So to that point, I was thinking about this today, actually, because I hit the grocery store during lunch earlier today for my wife. And one of the things that I notice is that my route when I go into the grocery store, and I think that you'll find this true with most grocery stores, not all of them, but most grocery stores, if you go in and you just stay on the outer edge
Yes.
Those are the things that you're going to be most likely able to eat that are going to be good for you and healthy. You start going into those middle aisles, ooh, it gets
Yes. All
wily.
bets are off.
Yeah, it gets real wily. And you got to be real careful. Like
Yes.
peanut butter, for example. My wife is like, okay, I don't
Yeah.
want peanut butter. Cool. I'm going to grab some Jiffy. No, it's got to be
Yes.
only peanuts. and
Yes.
salt. That's it.
Peanuts
No
and salt.
canola oil, none of this other, whatever. She names off a bunch of other ingredients. She's like,
Yep.
these are common ingredients in most peanut butters.
Yes.
Right. I literally found one brand, one out of like 25 peanut butters
Yes.
that was like that. That was it.
Yes.
I was shocked.
Yes. And that is the very point, that you can make that choice to only put healthy ingredients in your body, and your body will reward you for that. Again, your body is mostly made up of bacteria. Most of the cells in your body are not human, but that doesn't mean they're not useful. And that's another conversation for another day as well, which is each of us is a walking ecosystem or a walking city. I like to think of my body as a city, and I have to take care of all the inhabitants. And there are millions and millions. There's actually hundreds of millions of inhabitants. And some of them get along and some of them don't. And so I can choose to do things to make them all get along and keep my body running.
Right.
Right. And when they're all working in harmony, then my body responds by giving me better digestion, absorbing nutrients better, not absorbing chemicals that are harmful to me,
Right.
not spinning off cancer cells. That's kind of a biggie, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just keeping energy flowing better. Like if your ecosystem within your body, if this city that you are the mayor of is running efficiently and in harmony, then all the bacteria get along and all the connections are being made, and your mitochondria is firing off electricity on each other, and they're reinforcing this notion, because they don't know what you are. You know what they are, but they don't know what you are.
Yeah.
And they don't know where you are. They don't know if you're in a car. They don't know if you're in bed.
Yeah.
They don't know. But what they do know is the mayor of this city taking care of us? And if he is, we're going to all play together nicely, and we're going to make this work.
Yeah.
And so there it is. So that's just one example. But the idea, again, is I have that choice to put nutrients in my body and limit the amount of chemicals that I put in my body that are not good for me.
To this point, this is actually kind of a story about how I met my wife, but along the same lines here. So when I met my wife, I had decided to try and join the green rush in California back in like 2014. Went out there to be a grower for cannabis industry. Met my wife at a water store. So a place called the Water Brewery, where they brew your own water. Now, what that means is they put it through a very highly filtrated process. Then they actually sold what was called Aqua Amore, or love water. But Amore standard for alkaline, mineralized, oxygenated, restructured, and energized. Amore. So it went through this entire process, and then you could choose, the different minerals you wanted it. You could choose your pH and all this kind of stuff. And I started really looking into water, just the science of water. Again, like I said, we're mostly made up of water. And understanding that, like, without you doing those things, there's actually something called living water, which is a hexagonal matrix of water molecules that form when all of these things happen. And it's the most bioavailable water you can possibly drink. So you could drink like a cup of this, like 4 to 8 ounces of it, and it would be better for you and more hydrating than if you drank 24 to 32 ounces of bottled water and even more tap water. Like when you think about tap water structure, it's getting pressurized through pipes, like pushed through, just bludgeoned, and then it falls out your tap. And we think that this is clean. So I drank this water I was down there for about a year. And a few months in, I was eating a very healthy, clean diet, thinking about the nutrients I was putting into my body. And as you can see, I'm kind of a redhead, very blonde, very pale person. Typically, if I go out to the beach, I got to put sunscreen on, right? Or I'm getting fried. Well, I was able to go out onto the beach by drinking this water and eating the diet that I was on, which was full of red, yellow, and orange vegetables and fruits, high in beta carotenes, which helps strengthen the cell wall structures and things like that for the skin, I could go out there for 4 hours and not get burned. Like no sunburn, not even like pink. You know what I mean? And I truly believe that it was because of the hydration that my body had. It was able to do what it needed to do. You know, I mean, I was drinking a gallon of this water a day. That was kind of the goal that I had for myself. And it was amazing how my body responded to that environment, into that situation. It was absolutely mind-boggling to me. And it really changed the way, even to this day, I do not drink tap water. I rarely, if ever, drink bottled water even. I have 5-gallon jugs that I fill up with reverse osmosis water. I put them through a whole vortexing situation. I put crystals, I put positive notes on the outside of the bottle. I remineralize it with trace minerals, and that's the water I drink. And if that's not available, I guess I'm drinking beer.
Well done.
Like,
yeah.
So
yes. Yeah, that's funny. We had our workshop that we did during the holidays called Celebrating the Entrepreneurial Spirit. And one of the things we touched on was that whole concept, and what's being proven now is water memory and water molecules reacting to emotion and frequency, vibes from people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were discussing, which I really enjoy, we did a toast during that webinar, where we really called out the fact that by having a toast at the beginning of a meal, you are effectively committing a prayer or an incantation that is being captured. The emotions of that are being captured in the glass that you're holding, the glass that you're raising, and then you're consuming it into your body that's mostly made up of water anyway, and aligning, like you said, aligning structure and crystals with those emotions. So to me, the epiphany that I had when we were talking about this a couple months ago, when we started down that path, was that you can, or that toast, having a toast at the beginning of a meal really is committing a wish to the universe and then literally drinking it, because the water actually does react to emotion and vibe and energy.
Yeah.
And these things are starting to be proven by quantum physics, and there are laboratory experiments. In this particular case, we talked a lot about ice crystals forming and how they form differently depending on the emotion that you're projecting into those crystals. And if you were to Google that, the first thing that you would see, not unlike a lot of other things, the first things that you would see is theories debunking it, saying, water can't have emotion and water can't have memory. That's ridiculous. But there are labs that have studied it, and they have been able to replicate this in a laboratory setting. And it makes intuitive sense that, we live in an electromagnetic universe. All things are connected. Emotions matter. And everything has its own vibration. And things harmonize or not.
Right. I think that this gives a fascinating rise to a conversation about technology, hydrocomputing, AI, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
things like that. I mean, Microsoft Bing, ChatGPT, I mean, these things are starting, I mean, they are nascent. It's not like, oh, these are coming. They've already been born, so to speak,
Yes.
and are learning. I mean, these things are like infants, you know what I mean? Just computing incredible amounts of information. And I just wonder, if they start moving towards, hydrocomputing for these things, how that could even possibly increase data storage, data speeds, things like that, as far as computational wise for these AIs. I mean, that's like next level type stuff. You know what I mean? So.
Yes, I do.
I know
you. That's a brave new world.
Conversation for another day, another episode as well. But yeah, I think it's really fascinating that we don't give enough credence to who and what we are. We just don't, right? and like, I think, as far as like breaking realities, it's kind of one of those things we've talked about of like, I think that I'm touching my fingers together right now, but I'm not. Again, there's always more space. We know this scientifically. You go down to the molecular level and it's just electrons bumping each other, right? So if I can consciously move this and I can consciously use this to move other things, imagine advancing that consciousness to the next level and being able to project that out.
Yes.
I mean, we hear these miraculous stories. Well, all new science is miraculous until everybody realizes like, oh, well, that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? Take this back even to 1980 and people will be like, what? I mean, This is like that would be Back to the Future style crap. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, that's right.
So.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And so I'll just share that future episodes, we're going to go deep on some quantum physics. There are a number of experiments that I'm aware of that prove things like telepathy and manifestation to some extent. And some of these things are being proven now in laboratory settings, and in a way that makes sense, but is still miraculous and phenomenal and like reality breaking. Some of those experiments in particular are actually reality breaking. Oh my goodness, yes, there's so much.
I actually had a philosophy professor of mine, one of the most renowned. He was the world's foremost expert on Ignaz Semmelweis, who actually was the guy who invented washing your hands, right, for disease and bacteria. Very, very big into the history of the philosophy, the history of medicine. He was also an expert on Immanuel Kant, really fantastic philosopher who was, talking about the nature of our reality, a priori versus priori knowledge. Do you know what I mean? Do we know before we get here or not? And he wrote an incredible paper that actually was about reincarnation with documented examples that we have already documented here within the world, right? Like some 2-year-old that is like telling his parents about, French World War II planes and like saying like he remembers things, and then finding like his previous life's sister, who's now at this time like very old, but going and like corroborating facts that this 3-year-old, 4-year-old, there's no way that he could have known these things. How else could he have known them unless he was reincarnated? I mean, I'm just saying.
Well, I'll share a couple of personal ones. I think I may have told you this before, but my daughter, when she was like 2.5, 3 years old, I was putting her to bed one night and she said, there were 2 things that she said that just gave me chills. And she said, first she said, I'm so happy I picked you as my parents, right? And I was like, wow. And then she said, and then I mentioned something about God because it's nighttime and we're like reflecting on the day. And she said, I had a teacher once named God. I'm like, that's awesome. Tell me more. She said, yeah, before Miss Christine, before Mr. Ivan, she named her teachers at her daycare. This is when she was 3 years old. And she said she could remember her teacher named God that she worked with before them.
Wow.
And she remembered some of the conversations, and God told her to be very patient with us. And she was so glad that she picked us as her parents. And I'm like,
oh my God.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm like, amen.
That's incredible. Like, whoa.
Yes. I'm like, wow, like I've got an angel in my house. I'm so lucky. Right. And I did have the epiphany. I mentioned my birthday was last week, and I did have the epiphany last week. I'm like, wow, my body just turned 55, but I'm really about 1,002.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how old I am, but spiritually I'm a lot older than 55.
Yeah, there's this feeling of like, I feel like I know more,
Right.
but yet somehow the world is telling me that I don't know more.
Right.
And I think that that's, and again, another conversation, in one of our episodes, as far as consciousness, remembering information, like knowing that there are no new discoveries, just rediscoveries.
Yes.
I mean, I just saw something, scrolling through my Google feed, right? They found like a 2,400-year-old indoor toilet that was excavated out of China. And it's like,
right.
And we thought indoor plumbing was a recent invention. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
No.
Like we like think that we're inventing all these new things when really we're just remembering all this stuff that we've already done.
Yes.
So
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so a couple of things. I had intended is to challenge our audience more on reality and perceptions today, and what do we know is real and not real. But based on the conversation we've already had, I'd like to share with you the epiphany that I had this last week, and we can riff on that for a minute. And it's and again, like for everyone tuning in, this is what Trent and I do. So so the epiphany I had this week is that so often you ask someone like, hey, like, how was your weekend? They're like, oh, it was fine. I'm like, what'd you do? I'm like, nah, nothing. And for the first time in my life at 55 years old, I had this epiphany that, well, no, you're not doing nothing. Like your heart beat about 750,000 times yesterday.
Yeah.
That's not a small thing, because
Right.
if it chose not to, that's it, you're gone, right?
You're
Like
done.
there's never a moment in any day of your life that you're doing nothing.
Right.
And so it occurred to me that that's kind of a funny way to look at things. To ever in your life tell another person that nothing, right? Like I'm not doing anything. Like nothing could be further from the truth. First of all, the fact that you're even sitting and breathing, and that you are aware that you are a conscious being in the universe, that's a miracle to start with.
Yes.
And when you think you're doing nothing, your body is still handling about 1 million tasks. Like your cells are fighting off bacteria, they're fighting off viruses, they're fighting off, they're trying very hard not to produce cancers. They're trying to correct cancers that they might have produced. I am of the belief that we all have cancer routinely and just don't know, and our bodies handle it. And it's not until something gets out of control and then you go to the doctor and the doctor discovers it and then you deal with it another way, right? But in the meantime, it's likely that all of us have all kinds of illnesses throughout our life that we don't even know we have. And so your body is doing all of these things. It's processing air and turning it into energy. It's processing food and turning it into energy. It's getting rid of the waste. Like all of these things they're not small things.
No.
And yet we will tell each other, and I think it's just a social norm, right? That we have learned a habit at a young age to say, nothing. I didn't do anything yesterday. I just watched Netflix.
Yeah. Well, so to that point, taking it onto a philosophical level on that same line of thought here, I had a professor who said there is not nothing, for by naming it nothing, you've made it something. By giving it a name, you make it something. Even though you named it nothing, nothing is something. You have created this mental concept. This comes from my philosophy of language, and just like, where do we derive meaning, and like, what are words but scratchings on a wall, right? Like there's this whole thing. So we say like, oh, it's nothing. Well, nothing is something because you just called it something, which is nothing, right? So if it's not, there is not nothing, there's always something. And to further that line of thought, kind of on the health side of things, I had a separate guru out of India that I was working with. One of my coworkers, this guy was given to an ashram when he was 7 and lived there till he was 19, studied all religions, everything. I mean, the guy is just a fountain of knowledge and understanding. But one of the things that he was telling me is that when it comes to like dis-ease, whether that's joint pain, whether it's a flu, whether it's cancer, I don't care what it is, anything that makes you out of ease, dis-ease, if you name it, you give it a home and a place to stay. So when you start feeling like, oh, like I may have like my throat, I think I have the flu. Well, you just gave it a name. You just gave it a pathway and a direction for a home within yourself. So one of the things, I grew up constantly in the doctor. I had tubes in my ears 3 times. I would get strep throat and earaches like twice a year, like clockwork, September, February, March time, like change of the season type situation. And I just got really adverse to like the approach of Western medicine, right? And I hated the doctor. I remember being in kindergarten and my mom was taking me to the doctor, and I literally jumped out of the car and started running down the street in the opposite direction. So to that point, that kind of resonated with me in the sense of my conscious ability to give things home or not, whether that's a belief, whether that's a disease, whatever that is, name it, say it out loud. Literally, I have stared myself in the mirror and told myself, I'm awesome, I can do this, I'm successful. And even though in that moment, there was nothing I was really doing, but like reinforcing that belief, giving myself a home for those concepts to take root and start growing, for things to start happening in my life, to bring those things in the way that I was trying to manifest them. So nothing is not nothing. It's definitely something. So be careful what you give a name to and what you invite into yourself, whether that's your energetic space, your home space, your business space, whatever that is.
Well said. So we're almost out of time, but I want to follow up with another thought on that same path, which is, and you're going to have to fact check me on this one. You're the scholar. The Chinese have a word mu, which is neither 0 nor 1. And that's always fascinated me. And it's fascinated me in particular because, the world is made up of zeros and ones, right? Like that binary rules are our civilization today. And yet there is space between the zeros and ones. And that space is not insignificant. It's a very real thing.
Right. It is very much a real thing. Well, and so like to that point, kind of in that thought, there's a book I'd like to recommend and an exercise I'd like to give.
Excellent.
A book I'd like to recommend is Unified by Robert Langford. I always forget his name. I always say his last name wrong, but Unified by Robert Langford. It's a 24 chapter. It's very short, but it's a very meditative. You read one chapter a week. You read each chapter, which is very short. It's like maybe 2 to 4 pages at most. You read that every day. And it gives you little like prompts of things that you need to be doing. And this is to really try to help unify yourself on a new level. When I say unify, I go back to the yoga thoughts of spiritual, intellectual, mental, emotional, physical, trying to get all of those succinctly operating together. He's got a really interesting and unique approach. So, if that resonates with you, pick it up, read it. I highly recommend it. And then to that point, the exercise that I'd like to give is kind of like what we talked about. Try to give yourself at least 5 minutes. Try to make it 15. But whatever amount of time that you can allocate to yourself, take that time, find a quiet space. That's even if like you got to go out in your garage and sit in the car because family is doing stuff. Put a timer on your phone, go out there and give yourself that moment of reflection. I want you to breathe deep and take really deep breaths. The reason being is by taking a full breath all the way down into your belly, up through your diaphragm, into your chest, you're getting 6 times the oxygenation, which decreases cortisol and increases testosterone, effectively giving you a 60% gap in mitigating stress. Just by that deep breathing, allowing your mind that time. This is kind of like your daily Shavasana. You don't have to actually do yoga to do Shavasana. You can just sit there, take some deep breaths, reflect on the day and your beliefs and where you want to go. What do you want for yourself? Was it congruent? Was it harmonized? Was that interaction in line? You know what I mean? Or was it something where it's like, that's a really cool idea, but that's not relevant or useful to me? You know what I mean? Really take some time to evaluate that throughout your day. It doesn't have to be at the end of the day either. It can be at the beginning of the day. It can be at the middle of the day. Whatever it is, just take some time to give yourself that. I think it would be highly beneficial. People, I think, will find some great results.
That's awesome. Thanks, Trent.
Yeah.
So here we are. Thanks again. Thanks for the meeting. It's always a pleasure.
Indeed.
I hope our audience is getting something out of this as well.
Likewise.
Yeah, I always do.
And of course, if throughout these things there's stuff that you guys want to hear about, you know what I mean? There's questions you have, send them over to us. We'd love to create an episode around it, talk about it, answer some questions. We may even do an episode where that's what we do, is we answer questions, kind of riff on those things a bit.
Yep.
So let us know, reach out.
It's awesome.
All right.
All right. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.